Hello everyone. I would firstly like to acknowledge that the beautiful land on which we gather today is Aboriginal land. As we come together on Mother Earth, may we always realise and respect her gifts of water, air and fire. I pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal students and colleagues joining this gathering today. We previously watched a short video around what are the Sustainable Development Goals. This video is going to look at why we need the Sustainable Development Goals in a series that we're putting together for you. It's an interesting question. We always talk about the question of why. Why we need the Sustainable Development Goals. I think we need to come back to where we are as a world, where we are as a country, and where we are as a community, as a local suburb. I think it's important to always come back to why do we need these in order to think about how we're going to action them, and in particular how they impact us and our world moving forward. I particularly want to start this module with a video from Grow Harlem Brundtland. I don't know if you may have heard of Grow before, but she's a distinguished woman in the field of sustainable development, and in particular worked with colleagues to develop the Brundtland Commission report, which came out in 1997. And Grow in particular was fundamental in our definition of sustainable development today. That definition being meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And we reflected on what sustainable development was in our previous video. So I guess this module here talks about the state of the world today, and therefore why we really need to pay attention to what that definition means. So have a listen to this video and see what you take away.
In his searing study of human courage and cowardice, An Enemy of the People, the Norwegian dramatist Henrik Ibsen gives the following words to one of his characters, and I quote, "A community is like a ship. Everyone ought to be prepared to take the helm. Norway, like Britain, is a seafaring nation, so I hope you'll allow me to extend this metaphor a little. Our global ship is currently tossing and turning through stormy and dangerous waters. But is anyone prepared to take the helm and steer a course that will bring us to safety, whatever hardships this may entail? And is anyone listening to the voice from the crow's nest, warning of fresh dangers on the horizon? Or are we huddled below decks, either waiting for someone else to take the initiative or fooling ourselves that all is fine? The waters will calm themselves on their own and their own accord, and there is no need to trim the sails or change the course. Each of us, in our own way, needs to be prepared to take the helm in an appropriate and realistic way, from our local community to the national and international level. If we are prepared to do so, we will find that a chart exists to see us through the storm. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals cover all aspects of human life and development, from health, education, and the environment, to peace, justice, security, and equality. Unlike the Millennium Development Goals, they importantly apply to all countries and not just the developing world. So every head of state, every government, and every citizen has a responsibility to ensure that these goals are met.
So have a think about some of the key takeaways from what Gro mentioned in that video. For me, I think one of the key takeaways is when she mentions that each of us needs to play a part in sustainable development goal, in sustainable development. And she reiterates the importance of using the SDG framework as a lens through which we can have this larger conversation. In playing this particular module out, I want us to understand where we are as a world. And one of the ways we can do that is by having a look at some of the dashboards that are out. So all countries are being measured in the Sustainable Development Goals on an annual basis. This current picture is the SDG index, dated, this is the 2019 index. The 2021 hasn't come out as yet. This being April 2020, it's not out as yet. And I just want you to have a look at where the different countries are at. The arrows there, I particularly wanted to just focus on Australia and how they've been progressing on the index for the last couple of years. And remember that there's a lot of lag in terms of where we're at as a country, the decisions we make now, and how they impact us moving forward in regards to this index. So the index is a measure of our ability to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and how we are tracking, and that is measured using the indicators and the targets that were discussed in video 1. So have a look at some of the countries on the top of the ladder and discuss amongst your families, discuss amongst your classes, discuss amongst your colleagues why you think those countries are up in the top 10, and why do you think we as a country are progressing further down. This is the OECD country index score for 2019. The dashboard gives us, I guess, an indication of where we are at in comparison to other countries, and enables us to look within those particular areas to see how we're tracking and further actions that we can take. So as you can tell from this dashboard, we as a country the green means that we are on our way to meeting that particular target, and red means we are at critical levels and we will not meet that target by 2030. And the yellow type amber are somewhere in between and more tracking towards red than we are green. So as you can see in 2019, having a look at the countries, and I'll just choose Australia for example, we are at critical levels for zero hunger, affordable and clean energy, responsible consumption and production, climate action. They're the key ones that we're at critical levels for, and we are a very deep amber on gender equality, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, life on land, life below water, and partnerships. I think it's really interesting to look at this dashboard, and let's have a bit further analysis of why. Zero hunger. In Australia, we have around 2 million people that are on food relief each year. So zero hunger is not necessarily about having access to food, it's access to healthy food. And very much related to our agriculture, our practices, our obesity rates, our ability to source our own food. If we look at gender equality, Australia has some of the highest gender pay gaps in the world, and currently we're sitting between the 14 and 16%. We know we have some of the highest per capita greenhouse gas emissions, and we have the worst domestic material consumption rate of all OECD countries. Our fish stocks are overexploited, and our rate and magnitude of climate action failure puts us up there with some of the most discussed countries in this particular area. So this kind of gives us a feel for where we are at as a country, and why it's important for us to not think that the Sustainable Development Goals are just for developing countries. there's a very fine line between what's a developed and a developing country. And these goals are now enable us to take that holistic view of where we're at as a country in regards to our actions around our communities, the environment, and our economies, given that they are so interconnected. I'm just going to run you through and just having a brief look at the dashboard for the world, because what I want you to do is not necessarily be able to replicate this information, but more to understand, as you can see, the impact of our actions as we travel through the different parts of the world. So this is the dashboard for East and South Asia. The grey, if you're noticing, why is there a grey there? The grey represents that there's not enough data that is collected in that particular country for that particular statistic. This is Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Really quite interesting to look at, this group of countries. There's not a lot of data tracked in regards to life below water. This is our Latin American and Caribbean, and what you may start to notice is the difference in between Sustainable Development Goal 3, health and well-being. We're moving towards a lot of red in this area, and peace, justice and strong institutions. We're looking at some of the highest corruption levels in the world in these particular group of countries, and so you can see where that red is playing out. This is our Middle East and North America group of countries. This is our sub-Saharan Africa countries. So you can see how those critical levels in that red has kind of migrated, especially in those African countries where the red is very much around, poverty, hunger, health and well-being, education, those crucial areas to enable us to progress in some of these spaces. This one is quite an interesting dashboard. This looks at the Oceania. And for Australia as a country, these are some of our closest neighbours. And there's way more grey on there than we would all like to see, I think. So this means that these countries, there's not enough data collection activities for us to even know the state of play in these particular areas. This last slide, when we're looking at why we need the Sustainable Development Goals, this is the Global Risk Report. This is a 2020 report from the World Economic Forum. And the World Economic Forum in 2020, and this report was produced obviously before the coronavirus pandemic. What occurred here for the first time that the World Economic Forum has been producing this report is that the top 5 global risks for our world were related to the environment. And what that means is, and the graphic that I have there to the right of this slide shows you the interconnectedness between our global risks of the environment, society and our economy. It's really important as we move forward that we look at these risks holistically. We know from, as a country and as a world at the moment, we can see the impact of health, and in particular on our economy and what's happened with our economy, and in particular the impact on the environment. So COVID-19 has really enabled us to see the interconnectedness of a risk and how it plays out, and how it's important to take that holistic approach at this time. So this module just finishes with this image, and it's a very powerful image and shows us why the Sustainable Development Goal framework is so important, why these are systemic issues, and that we need to take a holistic and interconnected approach to actioning them. What this means for you in your discipline is, as you're working in your discipline, as you're learning in your disciplines, to always try and take into account, how does my discipline affect this other area that I may not have thought about before? And what opportunities does that allow me to take on board?